Hello, I'm Christopher and I'm doing this video for the Awareness Effect blog. I don't really have a planned script for this, so I'm just gonna try to see if something good comes up, like based on just the contemplation I was kind of mulling over just like before this moment. And what I've been thinking about is, like, for the last couple of days I've been thinking about, living in a way where you allow anything to happen, and also where you are trying to be awake to every single moment, to not miss a single moment. I've been kind of contemplating this sort of practice and the effects, and trying it out practically. But so today, this morning, I kind of took that perspective one step longer, and I realized that there are actually two ways to look at it that are both viable and valid and valuable. So I wanted to discuss the two ways in which you can look at kind of allowing anything to happen and being present and awake in every single moment, how you can look at that in two different ways. So, as I said, one way to look at it is like I just described, that you're doing it as a practice. You're assuming a mind set in a position, a mental position of allowing anything to happen. You kind of take a step back and you surrender, and you just say, okay, whatever wants to happen is free to happen. And also you try to put your mental state in a state of awakeness and focus and presence, so you won't miss anything. You're kind of you won't experience any kind of gaps of time where you were paying attention in one moment and then there was a moment of sort of unconsciousness where the mind kind of just started feeding on itself and you kind of disappeared for a second or two, and then you were kind of conscious again and, oh shit, I lost myself in thought. And that kind of awakeness, being present to every moment. And then there's the more ultimate and absolute perspective when it comes to these sort of concepts of allowing anything to happen and being awake. And that is to recognize that if there is experience at all, if there is the sense of a present moment at all, if there is manifestation at all, then there necessarily have to be some kind of awakeness. You wouldn't be able to claim that there is manifestation of any kind without first granting that you are also awake to that manifestation. So in this sense, you could say that you are as awake when you are lost in thought as you are when you are meditating and being very actively you're practicing being present in the moment. You could argue that there is exactly the same amount of awakeness both when you're lost in thought and when you are deeply present, because the moment is as manifested in when you're lost in thoughts about past and future, as there is when you're just present and very silent. You know, awakeness and manifestation, if in the absolute existential sense, they are not separate, you know. And I find this to be two perspectives or two ways to look at the concept of being awake and being present that are both valid and valuable. And it's also kind of important to be able to separate them, because I think that it's quite easy to end up thinking that being awake equals the sort of practice of being present. But I think that being awake can equally mean to recognize that awakeness and simple manifestation of this present moment is actually one and the same thing. You know, whereas one way to be awake is to be present, but another way to be awake is to simply understand and notice as a sort of, in the spirit of beingness itself, you notice that simple manifestation is the awakeness of your absolute being. And to rest in that without any sense of doership or any sense of practicing anything. It's just being, you know, being without trying to be. You can say that manifestation is like that. Manifestation, the simple fact of manifestation right now is being without trying to be. And that is awakeness in the absolute existential sense. And I think this is kind of valuable to understand and to notice. And to understand that, you know, being present isn't as deep as this kind of awakeness, let's say. And this also goes for, you know, what is the right thing to do next? What should I do? And this can also be looked at in two different ways like this. Like, either you can assume a position of openness and, you know, willingness and presence to allow life to unfold spontaneously, and you can become deeply aware of every single nuance of your own internal movements and the subtle movements of the world outside of you. And you can just allow everything to just flow spontaneously. But you can also recognize that the next step of events, whatever that might be, is an inevitable and perfect evolving of the current patterns. Like, if you consider reality to be a bunch of somewhat coherent patterns, like this body is a somewhat coherent pattern, and this table is a somewhat coherent pattern, and the trees outside are somewhat coherent patterns. And in their patternness, they also dictate what they must become next, you know. They dictate that to such a precise degree that there's only ever one thing that can happen next. There are never any options. There are never any. There's never any scope for compromise, because everything that already is, it also dictates what it needs to become next. So the next step for everything is inevitable and it's perfect, in the sense that only one thing can become of what is already a fact. So, like on a human level, you can assume this position of openness and willingness to allow anything to happen, and this is not a bad thing in any way. But it can also cloud the fact that whatever happens next, even if it's you being lost in thoughts of the past and the future, that happening was the perfect and inevitable next step of the unfolding of beingness, of reality, of the, absolute spirituality. So this is kind of two ways to look at the same sort of concept of what should I do, and what's the right thing to do next. And the answer to that is that the right thing to do next is the thing that happens next. And you don't know what that is, but whatever it is, you can understand that that was 100% inevitable and 100% perfect. So, there are two kind of fundamental ways to position yourself existentially. And one is that you position yourself as the human being, where you kind of take you're actively practicing allowance, and you're actively practicing presence, And you can call that surrender and being awake. Or you can go to the even deeper layer, and you can simply come to understand, as a living understanding, that the next step of reality, of yourself and of reality, is inevitable, and it is perfect. And that awakeness is ultimately nothing but manifestation itself. If there is manifestation, and if you're honest, you can never claim to have experienced no manifestation. The experience of no manifestation would be a form of manifestation itself. So you have never not been awake in this sense. The simple fact that there is manifestation right now is the fact that you are awake. And you can rest in this understanding, You can rest in the understanding that manifestation equals awakeness, and that the next thing that happens is inevitable and perfect. And if you understand this, you also understand that there doesn't need to be a self present for reality to keep on being what it already is. There doesn't need to be a self for this body pattern to keep unfolding according to its pattern and purpose and whatever. And there doesn't need to be someone being present in order for awakeness to be a fact, because manifestation is already happening before this body is trying to be present, and manifestation is awakeness. So it seems to me perhaps that there are moments when it's called for to assume a position of allowing and to practice being present. You will know when that is called for, I think. You will sense that, okay, now there is a lot of resistance going on, for instance, and now there is a lot of unconscious kind of you will sense in your own behavior that you're not being present, and that is having a negative effect on your experience. And in these moments, to practice allowance and to practice presence is called for. And then in other moments when you wish to meditate and connect with your own existence on an even deeper level, where you reach an even deeper state of surrender and sense of what it means to be awake, what it means to be, you can recognize that awakeness and manifestation are one and the same thing, and that every single happening of reality, including yourself, is inevitable and perfect. You can come to recognize in a subtle felt sense that there is only reality happening right now. Selfless reality happening right now. And your own awakeness is the simple manifestation of this. I think that's all I had to say about this. Thank you.